All right, teammates. We are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the number one podcast on innovative teamwork. Great to have you. Looking forward to having you back for more. To my regular listeners, already know how we get down. You already know how we roll here. Bring you nothing but the best. You hit the play button, which means there's going to be something great that happens for you within the next. There's going to be things that happen for you where you realize you're not just alone. Whatever you may be going through, whatever may be challenging you at this particular time. We're here to tell you you're not going through it alone. I have Mr. Nick Jain. No, excuse me. Yeah, Nick Jain. Got it. I was thinking, you know what? I was thinking of there's this movie called Jane something, Jane Doe or something like that. Am I? Yeah. I said Nick Jain. I'm like, yo, it's not the some. But anyway, yeah, Nick Jain found. Now you didn't found a company, but you're like the head of the company called IdeaScale, correct?
Yeah, so my predecessor, Rob Hohen, co-founded the company with a guy named Viv Bhaskaran. Rob retired about 2 years ago, and they brought me in as an external CEO hire just past 2 years ago now.
Yes, and that was the one of the biggest things that struck me because I was listening to a lot of the way you spoke about the company and your upbringing. And me, I've been a person who has had an idea every minute, like constant ideas to try this, try that. And you actually describe it as a CRM for ideas. So I can't wait to dive deeper into that. But before we get there, I do want to give you the opportunity because you came from very humble beginnings. You were raised by a single mother in India, and you went on to achieve a lot of things in the business world. So probably the best way to start off would be just talk a little bit about your upbringing and how you transitioned from India to America, and then we'll kind of go from there, man.
Perfect. Thank you again for the kind words and introduction. So I've got a bit of an odd background or story. My parents immigrated from India to Canada in the 1980s. At that point, didn't matter whether you had a college degree or not. If you came from India, you had to start from scratch. So typical, work at McDonald's, came with the shirts on their backs and $5. So they actually, right after I was born, they sent me to India to grow up with my grandmother till about the age of 5. So I actually did not meet both my parents in memory till just after my fifth birthday
Oh,
when they sent me back to Canada. So kind of a really unique upbringing where all my first memories, my first spoken language, everything is from India. And then, the very first time I saw my mother, I actually cried because, who's taking me away from the only lady who I've never ever known as a surrogate parent.
oh gosh,
But
yeah, that is
beyond
crazy.
that,
And shout
sorry,
out to the parents, dude. I gotta because you
yeah,
mentioned that.
amazing, difficult
Shout out to them
sacrifice.
for making that sacrifice because that I couldn't imagine how difficult that is and humbling that may be. And then for the grandmother to take you in, you got to shout them out, man. So shout out to the parents for that.
No, my parents and my grandmother made tremendous sacrifices to give me the opportunities in life that I wouldn't otherwise have had.
Right.
But after that, kind of grew up a very typical middle class life up in Canada, and then moved to the U.S. for college. Got a really good opportunity to go, and some really good financial aid to go to Dartmouth. Obviously, a good school. Studied math physics there, and then for the first 10 years of my career, I worked on Wall Street as a professional investor. And for the last 5 or 6 years, somehow I stumbled on the job of being a professional CEO. So I've either run or co-run now a $100 million revenue trucking company with 1,000 people, warehouses, trucks moving back and forth across the country, then a men's shoe company, and now for the past 2.5 years, IdeaScale, which is a B2B SaaS company that makes innovation management software for really large organizations such as the post office, TSA, Comcast, these large household names that you and I work with on a daily basis or encounter. We help them actually innovate so they're relevant not just today, but 5 years, 10 years, 50 years in the future.
Man, there's so much you said there that I want to dive into. But before we get into the kind of the weeds of how idea scale works and how they're able to see into the future, because I do think that is actually very important for us to talk about. This is innovative teamwork. We discuss a lot of that here. Just talk us through what your college experience was like, because it's hard to gauge when you're in college and you may be interested in business, you may be interested in majoring and having an MBA. You really can't predict it's hard to gauge what it's going to be like in the classroom. So seeing that you obviously appreciated the opportunity, you're at Dartmouth, and I believe too, was it Harvard Business School that you ended up spending some time? What was the college experience for you as you were kind of going through it, and you kind of look back on it now and talk and reflect on how it may have prepared you?
Sure. So there were pros and cons, right? Showing up
Right.
as a, middle class immigrant kid at a school like Dartmouth, you're definitely part of the lower socioeconomic strata. People have cars, they
Right.
vacation fancy places. I
Yeah.
can't afford to fly back for Christmas break, right? Because
Hmm.
that's, $2,000 my family didn't have at that point.
Yeah.
So very different kind of economic experience versus, many people who attend good schools. So that was certainly strange, but not unwelcoming. I think Dartmouth did a good job of making sure, they kept the doors open during the holidays for folks like me who couldn't afford to fly back. Academically, I absolutely loved it. So I showed up wanting to be a science major, wanting to go on towards a PhD in physics. I actually did complete my physics degree, but along the way, I fell in love with abstract mathematics. And Dartmouth, because of its liberal arts curriculum, allowed me to go take a degree in math and physics, and at the same time go take courses in English literature, in feminist literature, in economics, things that you wouldn't have necessarily been able to if you'd been in a program where you only are allowed to study one thing. So loved that. Was on the crew team for a couple of years, so rowed at Dartmouth. All in all, a really good experience. Really cold though. Really, really cold for somebody who was raised in a place where it never drops below 35.
Yes, understood, understood. I went to Stony Brook University. I grew up in Maryland. I went to Stony Brook, and in Long Island, when it gets to those cold temperatures and you have the beach that's right there and the wind hits it, it is a different type, a different level of cold. So, I understand exactly what you mean when you say that. Now, when you graduated and you mentioned you want to get into, be a science, you want to be like a science teacher, I'm assuming.
No, I
Oh,
wanted to go into research as well as
huh?
teach at the collegiate level was kind of
Right.
my ingoing aspiration. Probably that was my aspiration till probably junior year of college.
Yeah. So what happened? What happened when you finally graduated and got your undergrad? Where did the win? Because that's another point. I know the reason I'm asking this is because as listeners, it's really hard to tell you to go to. I mean, college is important, but it's more so important. And I'm glad Dartmouth gave you that option to know specifically what you want to do and give you certain things that you were able to do. But it's hard to figure it out, quote unquote, when you're in college, and especially when you get that undergraduate degree and you're expecting all these great things to happen for you, and then you realize, wait a minute, this is a real dog eat dog world. So, talk us through a little bit about what happened when you finished your undergrad.
Yeah, so coming out of college, like many people, I wasn't sure exactly what I want to do. I had this idea that maybe I want to go into academic research, but I also really like the business world. A lot of my friends were going to work on Wall Street or for big consulting firms or
Right.
corporations. So I said, okay, let's try two things. I got a great offer to go work for a really good consulting firm, McKinsey, and I told them, hey, let me just go do something else for a year. And I actually went and did economics research for a professor at MIT. They sent me over to India where I did a bunch of on the ground,
Wow.
development
Well,
economics
that's back in
research.
your hometown.
Exactly. I actually got to meet some of my on my father's side of the family who I'd never met growing up for the first
Huh.
time ever. So
Wow.
that was a part of the allure as well, right? I wanted to go back to where I'd grown up and meet a portion of the family that I'd never ever met before.
Hmm.
Um,
And then
so I
you
went
went,
back
so
and
when
did,
you went
oh yeah.
there, you were helping them in, like, were you helping them develop economically? Walk us through a little bit about what the
Yeah, so I worked for a woman called Esther Duflo, who actually subsequently went to win on the Nobel Prize in economics, the first woman ever to do so. So that was kind of cool. Obviously, I did not know this. This was 10 years before she'd won a Nobel Prize.
Right.
But my job was specifically so what Esther Duflo became, or Professor Duflo is very famous for, is running these on-the-ground experiments to figure out whether development programs actually help the poor or not. So you can imagine
Hmm.
uh, all these programs, you try and cure poverty or you try and improve development. We don't actually know whether these government programs work or whether you're just giving money away to people in a way that doesn't help them develop. And that's true here as well,
1000%.
right?
Right.
There's
Very
there's
true.
an
And we're
organization.
recording this in
Yeah,
a political season, so I'm glad we're talking. I'm not going to ask you who you're voting for, but
yeah.
I'm glad we're at least discussing the concept of politics, because so many times do we depend on a certain politician. We think that they're going to just solve all our problems, but there are people like you on the field level figuring out, hey, does this actually work, and testing it out every day. So I'm super happy you're talking about this.
Yeah, thank you again. That's what Professor Duflo became really famous for, which is
Right.
differentiating between government money that's wasted on stupid programs versus
Hmm.
programs that actually help help people, which is what, governments ideally try to do.
Right. Okay, so you're there, and then eventually, do you land? Like, how does when did the Harvard Business School decide when you decided to go to
Sure.
the Harvard Business School?
So I did my 1 year of research
Mhm.
and realized, look, I really like research, but I probably don't want to be in a career academic by myself, sitting in a room. I'm an extrovert. I want to be around people. So I decided, okay, I'm good at math. I like talking to people. Where do I go? That's a very natural transition to Wall
Mhm.
Street. If you're good at math and you like talking to people and you're competitive, Wall
Mhm.
Street's good. So I spent the next 4 or 5 years of my career and doing financial consulting at McKinsey, and then a couple years at Bain Capital, which is a huge private equity firm in
Mhm.
Boston. It was kind of fun. I was there when Mitt Romney was running for office, and he was the founder of Bain Capital. So we
Okay.
got a lot of media, poking around. So I did that for a couple of years, about 4 or 5 years in total, and
Uh-huh.
then I had the opportunity to go to business school at Harvard, which obviously, for a kid from my background,
Yeah.
is a life changing opportunity.
Yeah. So what was that like for you though? Because I grew up in Maryland and I was around that time. I was actually taking a public speaking course during the time Mitt Romney and President Barack Obama were running. What was it like seeing that and then having the experience of going to the Harvard Business School? Did you walk in kind of having background knowledge about this is the way you should do this, and then you had the experience in India? What do you think? How do you think it dictated your experience when you were there?
Sure. So I think one of the really cool things Harvard Business School does is it brings in a diverse array of people. So it's not just, there's, certain, there's the sons and daughters of billionaires or famous politicians.
Hmm.
There are
Yeah,
people who worked in nonprofit, people who worked in education, people who had, medical degrees and were practicing
yeah,
doctors. One of my favorite people was a helicopter pilot in, I think Iraq, where he commanded like attack helicopters and squadroned them. He was a major in his 40s. So really diverse group of people from all over the world in different walks of life.
hmm,
And so the way they structure their program is it's meant to be inclusive for people, regardless of whether you're coming from a traditional business background like me, or
hmm.
whether you're coming from have never done, seen
Yeah,
accounting or marketing in your life.
right.
So you basically didn't have to show up prepared beyond like being a generally well-intentioned, hardworking person. There were no skills required to show up on day one. Obviously, develop them over the course of your time there.
Hmm. So your experience, and I have to ask too, because I've been into well, actually, it's been multiple schools where I've been the only person of my black with my last name going to that school. How was the experience like? Did you feel any added pressure to be someone that represents an entire, like your entire family? Because, like you mentioned, you're one of the ones that quote unquote got it out. How were you able to maintain a, I'm gonna do this because I know I'm good at it, or I know it's something I want to do, and I that pressure of having to be maybe the first one in my family to graduate, or whatever. Was any of that going on in the mind of mentally blocking you?
So mixed aspects there, right? Again, pretty diverse group of people. So I wasn't the candidly, I was not the only guy who looked like me. There
Right.
was a fair number of people from India or other, countries around the world.
Hmm.
Um, HBS does have a pretty low diversity economically, as it, as many kind of good schools do. So I was definitely on the lower socioeconomic spectrum of folks
Right.
there. But I don't, there was an experience where I mentioned that I used to work as a carpenter in high school to earn some
Mhm.
money, and that was really like one of my classmates commented that he'd never met a guy who'd been a carpenter before. Whereas like all
Right.
my buddies from high school, they went on to become carpenters, electricians, mechanics, right? Like
Which there's nothing wrong with
skilled
that either,
trades.
and I want to make sure
Yeah, no,
I make that point too.
those are
There's
good jobs,
absolutely
but
nothing
it's
wrong with
astounding.
doing that. Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I did
Okay.
not feel unwelcome there, especially
Mhm.
after having done 4 or 5 years in private equity.
Yeah.
I felt pretty, I felt welcome there. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, that's also I think that's a great point because one of the things I do encounter a lot, and I teach now, I teach at a school that's primarily minorities there. And one of the things I try to really get through their head that it does not matter. It does not matter your skin color, it does not matter your ethnicity. I mean, you'll come from broken homes, you can come from wherever. If you really put the work in and you really love what you do and you really have a genuine interest in learning, there's going to be a place for you. And you don't have to be that person that's always using an ethnicity as a kind of a crutch to hold you back from doing incredible things because like you said, you eventually were able to be put in a situation where you're running this company named IdeaScale. And this when you mention I just want you to kind of just walk us through the whole process because when you mention a CRM, we all know what a CRM is, but a CRM for ideas is something that I think is just genius because we have a lot of ideas, and every idea isn't a bad idea. Every idea isn't a good idea. Ideas are just about the timing of it, the timing of this idea of us talking, the timing of Zoom. Zoom's been around long before damn COVID, but the idea of it became great because it was stored somewhere and people were able to use it by 2020. They found a need. So walk us through the company, how it works. Just kind of give us as much details as you can.
Sure. Again, Rob Hohen and Viv Hoskern are two co-founders. 15 years ago, they came up with this great idea, and it was actually President Obama's chief of White House staff who was, I think, our first contract. That the idea that the government wanted to be more innovative.
Wow.
So credit to President Obama realizing, hey, the government needs to get
Yeah.
better. So our origins were the government wanting to get better at what it did, which is serving the citizenry. And what it's evolved to today, the government is still about 2/3 of our business, but we also serve major corporations. So, USPS, TSA, major agencies that you and I deal with on a daily basis, as
Yeah.
well as big corporations. So
My mother
Comcast
works
is
for
my
my
internet
mother works
provider.
for the post office.
Great. I use the post office pretty regularly. I live across
Exactly.
from one.
Shout out to mom. Shout
So
out to
what
mom. She works in transportation too. So
so what IdeaScale does is, let's go back to the CRM analogy. If you're in sales and marketing, you put all your customer data into that CRM. Every lead, every prospect goes into the CRM, and
yeah.
you can say, hey, this is a CRM this is a contact that I think is a hot lead. I'm going to move them forward and move them through the sales pipeline. Or you can say, hey, they're not really relevant. It's not great. It's someone who, my company is not relevant for my company. Imagine doing that, except for ideas. Right now, people take their ideas and they write them on Post-it notes. They email it to themselves. They stick it on an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And especially in a large organization, you can imagine the number of physical Post-it notes or random Excel spreadsheets that no one ever sees. Those notes never get in front of the CEO. So imagine taking all of those ideas and putting that into a centralized system where your colleagues, peers can upvote and downvote the ideas. They can say, hey, Oswan has a really cool idea, but we can make it even better. So let me comment on it or iterate on that idea. So that's what our system does. It collects all of the ideas from employees, whether you're junior, senior, whether sitting in Milwaukee or China or Washington, D.C., getting them all into one place, iterating on them with your colleagues, and helping the best ideas float to the top, where they can all of a sudden move through the funnel from being a mediocre idea to a great idea to, hey, we actually improved our organization.
Oh my
So that's
goodness.
what we do
This
for a
is
living.
so, I mean, it's so actually surreal that we're actually talking about this. So every Wednesday I do this thing. I do a series on my channel called Wintrepreneur Wednesday. And one of the things I talked about actually in today's recording was this idea I had when I worked at a gym to put ironing boards in the gym. All right, this was back when I was working at, it was Washington Sports Clubs. They used to be in there's some in Pennsylvania as well. But the thing is, I was working for like $7 an hour, and no one's actually listening to me. But if I'm thinking now that you said that, if there was a company that everybody, or a CRM that every single employee had access to, that I could plug in, hey, it might have kept, now this gym that I was working, it's no longer in business, but it might have been something that somebody else could have took in a different part of the company, and then that may have made the difference between a member staying and not staying, because you come to the gym, you work out, you may not want to have time to iron your clothes, having an ironing board there, and that's just an idea I had. So, all that being said is, just speak a little bit about how any examples or case studies that you can share in which this system has actually worked and people have come back and said, man, without this, I don't know where my business would be.
Sure. So I'll give a quick example that from the private sector, and then I'll give a quick example from the public sector. So in the private sector, one of the largest fast food chains, someplace I'm sure you and I have eaten probably in the last 6 months, right? One of the biggest fast food chains, household name in America. They realized they wanted new menu ideas. Okay. And they're great. They have lots of professional chefs in house, but they wanted to reach out to their, hundreds of millions of customers around the world and say, give us ideas for what our next new hot menu item should be. So thousands of
Oh,
people from around the
they
world.
asked a customer. That's
Exactly.
okay. Okay, I got you.
So
Makes
you can
sense.
you can use our software internally to talk to your employees, or you can reach out to anyone in the world or any mix of
I got you.
internal and external people. So
Right.
they decided to create an open IdeaScale campaign to reach out to their customers and say, like, suggest what items you would like to see on our menu. And thousands of customers did. And so one of those ideas actually got implemented because the company looked through it, said, hey, this is something we can do. It makes financial sense and our customers are demanding it. So let's stick it on the menu.
Wow.
So that's an example of something that happened in the private sector.
Right.
On the public sector, I have to be a little more discreet because of NDAs and things like that.
Yeah.
But some of our big government agencies, let's use TSA or post office or so on. I can't access their data because I'm not even allowed to access their secret government data. But imagine the small incremental changes you're seeing at TSA over the last 20 years,
Yeah.
right? Post 9/11, you imagine how
Well,
difficult it
it's
was to
funny
go
because you
through
keep
security.
mentioning these companies, and I have another cousin that worked at TSA, so it's
Well,
funny.
these are big
Yeah,
household names that
yeah, that's what.
Americans we deal with on a day-to-day basis. Let's use
Right,
the TSA for example. And
right,
candidly, I don't know whether we were influential or not behind some of these improvements because I
uh-huh,
don't get to see their data. But
right,
let's use the TSA for example, right? Like 10 years ago, it took a long time to make it through a TSA security line if you're going through an airport, right? You got to
mhm,
take off your belt, you got to take off your shoes, take off your watch. Look at it, over the past few years where they've moved from the X-ray machines to the micro imaging machines. They've
mhm.
added things like global entry. I don't know if you've tried global entry, but now you can go through, you don't have to take your belt or shoes
Yeah, I
off. You
can
can
fit
take
a
your
flight.
laptop
Yep.
out.
Hmm.
So these sorts of incremental innovations are happening not just because the senior, the chief of staff or the head of transportation secretary, but employees throughout the organization, the floor people who are seeing the challenges you and I encounter as we
Hmm.
walk through security, they're suggesting ideas, and systems like IdeaScale help that happen. And that's really nice to see when I encounter a government agency and say, hey, they got better today. The experience at the DMV is just a little bit better than it was last month. And sometimes I get to know that, hey, we contributed to that.
Yeah, it's so crazy because I had a family reunion in Trinidad, and I went so there was a flight I had to in the state to St. Croix where the airline they had a situation where I didn't have to wait in line. I could just go and get my boarding pass, do the handprint thing or whatever it was. But Trinidad, again, you got to step it up, Trini, all right, because they made me wait in line for like a couple hours, and I couldn't just get my boarding pass from the little kiosk or whatever, and that was kind of frustrating because I was already used to, hey, just putting my print in. I wasn't checking any bags or anything like that. So those incremental changes, what you're saying, isn't necessarily coming from the CEO of these airlines. It's actually coming from the people on the ground level, figuring things out. Say this would run a whole lot smoother. So that's clarifying. That's really, really gratifying
And
to.
not just the airlines, by the way, the government agencies. So the ideas are not just coming from the Department of Homeland Security. They might be coming from, a 24-year-old who noticed something about Homeland Security or about the
Mhm.
TSA or the clerk at the post office.
Exactly. So when it comes to finding new clientele, how do you qualify someone? How do you qualify whether it's a company or a person? Like, do you look to see what's not being done, what they're gonna need, and then you say, hey, we have this software?
Sure. So I think we qualify it in two ways. Number one is we do all this typical sales and marketing things that any B2B software company does that's aiming at large clients. So I don't think we do anything cool there. But where we really serve clients well is when an organization has decided they want a chief innovation officer, a VP of engineering, or a deputy director of engineering, or sorry, innovation. When they've decided that innovation is an important part of who they want to be and how they want to stay relevant over the next 5 or 10 years, when they appoint that person, we say, okay, we're probably the right software system you need. Just like imagine you're head of revenue or a head of marketing, a head of sales, you need a HubSpot or Salesforce or Zoho. When you're an innovation officer or chief innovation officer or even CEO nowadays, you realize that innovation matters. If you're McDonald's, if you're DHS, if you are the post office, if you're the Navy, if you're not innovating, your competitors are, right? And that's true at a national level too, right? If the Americans aren't innovating, the Chinese government is, right? And we as Americans need to stay ahead of some of our foreign competitors.
Right. Now, is there a database that you have, or do you guys just kind of look to see if someone actually filled that position, chief innovation officer? Like, how do you know that that position is being filled by somebody? Do you have people researching that?
Sure, yeah, there's again 2 or 3 ways. We have people on the sales and marketing team, they're always on the lookout for that.
For that, right?
Secondly, specifically for the public sector, when organizations are making a chief innovation officer position, they announced that. So I think the Army, I think it was the Army, I may be misquoting this, about a year and a half ago, they created a new position called the chief innovation officer. That's very senior, right? If the Army, United States Army, which
Exactly.
has, God knows, 1 million employees, is saying we're creating a chief innovation officer that sits up there with the generals,
Mhm.
that's kind of cool. And that's a big announcement. We stay on the lookout for that. And number three, Look, we are, especially on the government side, we're really well known. We are the people that are by far best in class at serving US government, federal, and state agencies.
Hmm.
And so when a new agency realize they want innovation software, we're usually the first call that they make
Yeah.
because we're really good at serving the government.
Right. So but when it comes to software though, you got to be thinking bigger. Like I'm curious now as you're talking, is this something that's strictly for big companies, or is it something that you use to serve small businesses as well? Like if there's a small business owner listening in, is there a way to connect? Is there anything that you may be servicing them with?
Yeah, so we offer our software completely free of charge to people who need less than 100 users. So if you are a one-person shop or a 50-person small business, you can use our software completely for free
Oh,
indefinitely.
okay.
Okay, so you can literally go to ideascale.com, click the get started free, and that's available right away. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up. Our
Mhm.
business model, obviously, where we make money is with large organizations. And
Okay.
candidly, like if you're a 30-person organization, whether you use a digital piece of software like ours or whether you use a whiteboard with post-it notes, you're probably okay. But
Mhm.
when you get to 5,000 people or 100,000 people that are sitting in different countries, different offices, some are out there on the field, some are
Right.
highly educated, some are blue collar, some are sitting in China, you
Mhm.
want to be able to use a digital system to collaborate. Again, using the CRM analogy, if you're three people, like an executive assistant, a salesperson, and a marketing person, you can just talk to each other. If you're 300 people, you don't even sit in the same floor anymore, right? So you need software to communicate. Same way, reason why you and I use Zoom or Slack or
Mhm.
Teams or Google Meet, all these pieces of software help people connect. And our software does that for a specific use case of innovation.
Yeah, but even if you are, and if you're listening in and you may think, look, I'm not big enough to even download this. First of all, it's free, so you should take advantage of it.
You don't nothing to
Secondly,
download, by the way. It's entirely online.
it's entirely online, so you should definitely take advantage of it. More so, getting in the habit, if you are interested in growing, getting in the habit of putting ideas in a system, putting it down on paper. Those are habits that are going to allow you to grow. Those are going to be the habits that make it so, okay, this idea that I wrote down 3 or 4 months ago now becomes something that's important. If you just kind of just tell your buddy about it, or if you're working with a smaller group of people, it's going to be impossible for you to remember every single idea when you also have to make sure the revenue's coming in as well.
Can I give an example for that? Let's
Yes.
so look, we're a mid-sized company. I've got about 100 employees or 95 or something like that, right? We
Mhm.
use our own software, and exactly like that. There's ideas that people posted a year ago, 2 years ago that resurface now because they become relevant to us now. Or there's an idea from one of my junior most engineers joined like 6 months ago or something that
Mhm.
like everyone on the company thought, hey, this is a really good idea. And it actually ranked above my idea as CEO. And that's great to see because the best ideas win. And it shows that, hey, junior person sitting on the other side of the world, your idea matters as much, if not more so, than the CEO's idea because it's a good idea.
Exactly, exactly. And when people get that, one of the most challenging, and I've worked in fitness, athletics, and now currently in education, the biggest gripe with people is when they don't feel like they're part of the company, when they don't feel like they're part of the organization, when they don't feel like they're being heard, they will leave. And these are very transient industries. And now, again, I've said it multiple times on this show. Regular listeners are probably tired of hearing me say it, but I will not get tired of saying it at all. Is when people nowadays can get in touch with whoever they want. So staying in a job that they don't like is not going to happen because they can go on their LinkedIn accounts, they can reach out to whoever. Next thing you know, they're gone. They don't even have to tell you. They could work abandoned. So, making sure that they feel like they're heard and that they're being seen is your number one of not your obviously number one job is to make sure the revenue's coming in, but your second most important job is making sure every single person is feeling heard and that you know where they are and what it is they want to be doing and how they want to build in the future. And this is a great way of doing that and making it so every single person in the organization feels heard. So, with all that, I do want to be very respectful of your time. Can you just tell people a little bit about what do you see coming down the pipeline? What's next? Do you plan on staying with IdeaScale? I know it's hard to predict the future,
Yeah.
but just kind of talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So for me personally, yes, I would love to stay at IdeaScale. I think it's a really cool opportunity to work for a really cool company. Setting aside the software, I've always believed in an idea meritocracy that the best ideas win no matter, where somebody went to school, what they look like, whether they're junior, senior. So the fact that I get to work for a company that is literally their product is personally awesome for me. So
Yeah.
I plan on being here, for the long term and helping build IdeaScale and continue to convey to our customers that innovation matters and you should use systematized way to achieve innovation like IdeaScale. In terms of what's coming down the pipeline, I think we have a couple of really cool things as a company coming down the pipeline. First is we are releasing something called Workspaces in about a month. If you want to read more about it, that's on our product roadmap. Number two, we have some really cool AI related features that I can't talk too much about right now, but they're coming
Go,
out in
baby.
about
AI is
6
taking
weeks.
over. What's coming? Artificial.
AI is awesome, right? And I'm not saying this just as the ChatGPT bug, but like AI just has dramatically changed the way people work as well as the way software companies can help their customers. And I think the third thing is we, as IdeaScale, at a more strategic level, setting aside individual features or buttons and knobs that are coming out over the next kind of 1 to 3 years, we're going from a company that solves, let's say, 30% of your innovation solutions or problems to probably 100%. So we believe that over the next kind of 1 to 2 years, we will be able to be the home base for any chief innovation officer, taking their ideas from beginning to end and helping involve their employees in that entire innovation process.
Yeah, and man, it's taken so much. Doing that takes so much work off their plate. I can only imagine the ones that you do serve that know you, whether they know you personally or they know the software. I can only imagine them realizing, man, the idea aspect, because when you're in business, you don't have too much time for ideas. You really don't. You got to figure out what's gonna work and what's not gonna work, and the things that work, you got to, because business moves. But if you have a situation where these things are stored, all right, got something, and let's just keep it rolling, keep it rolling. It definitely would create a peace of mind. So, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want to hear more? Where do you normally send people?
Sure. So to get in touch with the company, best way is going to ideascale.com, and you can either talk to my support team. They are 24/7, 365 real human beings, by the way. If you want to sign up for a free trial, again, ideascale.com, there's a button at the top right where if you're a company less than 100 people, you can use it free indefinitely. Takes less than 5 minutes to set up, probably like 2 minutes. If you want to get in touch with me personally, my name is Nick Jain. I am very accessible and findable on LinkedIn. I respond to 100% of messages. So if you DM me, I will respond.
Absolutely, absolutely. And all that will be included in the show notes as well. So, Nick, the final thing I do to close out all the shows is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. You are a young boy in Canada, you're seeing, or India, Canada, you're just a young person, and you're humble beginnings. You're not really you're not really seeing a lot of the future. You pretend that version of Nick has come into the Zoom room. Give him some words of encouragement, and we'll officially close.
Sure. I'll give two words of encouragement. Number one is, as you have said earlier in this call, it really doesn't matter what you look like, right? The Western world has done an extraordinary job of creating opportunities for people, regardless of what walk regardless of what gender you are, what you look like, which part of the country you come from. That's number one, really cool and really unique, and that's a privilege you should take advantage of. And number two is the value of education, and that can be education that you get from your high school, from your college. It can be from your trade school. I personally am still continuing to take courses from Coursera for free. So like the education, regardless of your field of life, is just tremendously enriching, both personally as well as professionally. And you should take advantage of the fact that we have such tremendous education opportunities that exist for free nowadays.
Exactly. And listen, I have absolutely nothing at all to add to that. The education and the fact that you're actually still doing it, given your position that you're still taking free courses, tells you a lot, says a whole lot about how much education really is out there. It's just a matter of you going out and go decide to make sure you are educating yourself in some way, shape, form, or fashion. All right. All that being said, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.